All right, welcome back to Tea and Stuff. Today I'm joined by Sohan over there in big old Texas. Where is it in Austin?
Austin, Texas. Yeah, West China Tea, Austin, Texas.
Yeah. So you're the owner. Are you the sole owner and operator of West China
No,
Tea?
I have business partners. The people, some of my teammates have shares. I'm the founder, but yeah, since
Nice.
2020, some of my teammates are also owners of the company.
Well, that's nice. I mean, it's like a lot of people want to like when they start a business, like they want to just do it all themselves, sorry. And it's not a bad option. Cuz you get all the glory, but then at the same time it's like but then everything is just solely reliant on one person. And sometimes it's really good to have like a little collective going. Uh, of
Oh yeah,
people that are just involved with the business. So it's not just, it's almost like sometimes it's keeping you in check of yourself.
oh yeah. Well, and it's not scalable to just do it yourself. Like if I had to ship all these boxes, I couldn't be doing this podcast with you. I couldn't be running a tea house. I couldn't be likewise if I had to do any of those other things on my own. Because like you come to the tea house, maybe I'm there. I'm not actually scheduled to work the front of house on any given day. I'm just around a lot doing support. But there's
Right.
other people who are like scheduled and on the clock getting paid to work here. And so my goal is for me to be able to like pull myself out of the equation entirely as far as the stuff I do now, and then focus on other stuff. There's other stuff that I feel like I could do for the company that
Well,
might not be these like day-to-day stuff.
I'm sure in the next year or two, you're gonna be heading over there, heading east. So that
To China.
alone is,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, oh yeah, if I
that
as soon as I
alone.
can.
So like that alone, that takes up a lot of time, a lot of focus, a lot of planning. So it's like it's extremely hard to be present and even just prepare for that type of travel, especially when you haven't been able to travel for so long. That
Yeah.
it's going to be that much more important for you, I'm sure, going over there.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, and it's been like the last time I was there was in 2019, so it's been more than two
Yeah.
years, which is the longest it's been since I moved to China in 2010 for the first time that I've not gone to China. It's very yeah, it's very but I mean this whole 2 years that we're talking about, this whole year and a half, 2 years we're talking about, it feels crazy under any, for anyone under any circumstances. Like this period of time has
Yeah.
just been a very unusual period of time. So I don't even know how we're going to remember it, when we're like, 10, 15 years from now, when we think back on this time, like will it feel like a year and a half? Will it feel like a short time? There's this whole time that, I mean, I know people go to like Tulum and stuff like that. That's cool. But I haven't gone out of the country or, barely out of the state since this started. So, and I usually travel a
Yeah.
lot.
I've been to Connecticut to see my mother and brother and nephews. Um, I think that's it. It
In
just they're
Connecticut, does Connecticut touch New York?
pretty much. You have to basically briefly pass through Massachusetts. You take the Mass Turnpike for just a little bit, but you're just riding between lines pretty much. You're not there for long.
Does anyone ever call it
Um,
Smassachusetts? That's too hard to
There's
say.
a lot, dude. There's a lot of nicknames for Massachusetts, both good and bad. Massachusetts it's a hell of a state. If I had my choice, honestly, of like relocating somewhere in the Northeast area, I for sure would go to Mass.
Cool.
It's a it's got bigger cities. Well, not bigger, but it's got substantial cities, but there's lots of like if like you want to have your own space, do your own thing, have a little more privacy. There's lots of areas and towns to live in to do that without being too far from a central area. So And
That's
Massachusetts
cool.
is also Massachusetts is right next to New York City. It's right next to Rhode Island. It's right next to Connecticut, New York.
Right,
It's
right,
just
right.
it's a
They call
really good
Boston the
hub.
hub
It is well. It's I mean, honest to God, it really really is.
of
It's
New
and
England
you know what's
and the
wild though?
Northeast.
So with the whole like whenever anybody basic knowledge of tea, everybody goes to like Boston Tea Party because that's what a lot of people that's really all they know of tea. So you would think that with that being a thing, like a really big thing, that you'd think that like even gimmick wise, there'd be a lot of tea businesses in Massachusetts and Boston. Dude, there is very little. There is there is very little. But our sales since we've opened show, dude, for the first couple of years of us being in business, a large concentration of our customers were in Massachusetts.
Really? You
Yeah,
got to
dude,
do
there is
it. You
a
got to go start a tea house in Massachusetts.
dude,
That,
it's well they have like one or two, I think. Like they have a Dobra. Um but it's just it's kind of a I feel like it's a missed opportunity.
yeah,
Like
absolutely, absolutely.
I just feel like I mean my own research shows that there are a lot of specific gong fu type drinkers in Massachusetts.
I
So
know,
it's like
I know. Me too. They come here. I meet people from Boston here. Like every couple of weeks, someone from Boston will come in and be like, "Yeah, there's no tea houses in Boston." Matt Lapardo is in Boston. He was one of our Chai students, and yeah, he's in Boston.
so it's very strange. It really is. I
Do
mean,
it. That's
oh God.
you're the one who's noticing it. You're the one who should do it. You should go open a tea house in Boston and be badass.
No. I'll point it out to other people and then I'll go sit in their tea room and enjoy tea. That's the
You
better
don't ever
route.
want to own a tea house that doesn't interest you at all.
Mm, like it's a decent retirement idea. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm never gonna retire, but I mean the sort of the end of life business plan sort of.
Interesting.
I would do that, but right now I'm really really focused on helping just getting tea going. There I have a thing I'm working on right now. I'm super excited about that is very much that. So it's like I don't need to have my own place because I don't have the physical energy to be present 24 hours a day, which is at least at the beginning what would be required.
Sure.
So you know, I've just been waiting for the right opportunity to come along of the right people that were really trying to do right by the leaves and right as far as it comes to education and you know if a customer has a question on it they don't want to have just it's a black tea and just have the education stop there
Mm,
like I
yeah.
met these folks that are they're big on sourcing their ingredients for their
Mhm.
food and stuff themselves. So obviously with the cafe, they wanted to do the same with like tea leaves and stuff. That's when they found out about me. And then talking more, they really their room is going to be interestingly tea focused, not entirely. They will have some type of coffee service and they're gonna do some small food. But I'll tell you, my hat goes off to these folks for how much they are really, without even knowing it, paying a lot of respect to the leaves and to tea itself that not almost anyone in at least upstate New York is doing. So it's very beautiful, and to be a part, and then to have been contacted to be a part of that was like
Mhm.
oh my goodness. And everything
That's
sounds good
cool.
at first, but the more meetings you have, you never know. Sometimes then you start to learn that maybe it doesn't jive as well as you thought. But meeting after meeting, these folks have just shown just beautiful morals, beautiful ethics and business expectation, and they're not looking to rob anyone's pockets. They just want to provide a damn good product and be able to know themselves about the product and
Hmm.
why it is a good product. Like they don't want to
Absolutely.
just I really love hearing that. People that don't just want to tell people we have some of the best tea, but be able to say this is why we have some of the best tea.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you're shutting out everything else. It just means that you'll have these reasons like, you know, knowing the farmers, things like that, where it's like, oh wow, this really does have reason to believe that this is probably going to be a nice product.
Absolutely.
With
Yeah, absolutely.
without with at the same, but and they really it's the venue is going to be very respective towards the cultural, um both the cultural history of the drink and
Hmm.
from the meetings I've had, there seems like they're also looking towards the future of the drink in terms of looking at some of the mistakes and misconceptions that have happened
Hmm.
and then correcting that through education and through example of this is how to do it, this is why to
Awesome.
do it that way. So yeah, so just like, and with hopefully, you know, considering that this continues to work out and comes to full fruition and stuff like that, with something like that, with a partner like that, and I would consider that a partnership, not just
Sure.
selling
It's a
them
business
tea.
partnership. Yeah.
I think that that would serve every want and desire I'd have right now
Hmm.
for the tea room connection. So basically, it's like having a tea room without having a tea room. So
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
it's kind of, you know what I mean. It'll be nice. It'll
And
be
that's
nice to, well, hopefully we'll also again be able to do like tastings there. Like I'll be able to
mhm.
do tastings like I did before the pandemic, where
Right.
like you just like you do, where your community, I think you call it, where people can just
Right.
come in. There's a server pouring. You toss. Back when I did it, I had a bowl out, and if you could toss $5 in there, I appreciate it. But let's say someone every now and then there'd be a person that would come in and they just have a dollar or two, but they were there because they really wanted to try tea, then hell yeah. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not, it wasn't really about the money. The money was just to help fund to
Right.
do the
Right.
activity. But
Yeah.
as long as people were showing that interest and even a level of appreciation, then it was all worth it. And it was beautiful helping to build a tea culture here because
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure, Jesus, man. I mean, I guess that's my question for you now is I would have to guess that in Texas, good old Tejas, I'd have to guess that it was at least minorly difficult getting a tea room and business up and going. What was that like?
It's funny. I don't get asked this question as often as I would expect. But that's a good question because you don't think about Texas when you think about tea culture. I mean, back
Sweet
when I
tea for
started,
sure, but
sweet tea, yeah, and that's about it. Texas tea, aka crude oil, like
mm-hmm.
the clampets. But
Yep.
yeah, you don't necessarily think of Texas. So it's interesting. The kind of the bigger question here just goes down to like people's perceptions of places. Because Texas, for sure, in a general sense, you've got a big space, and the population is concentrated in these big cities, but there are people living out there. And
Right.
the perceptions of Texas are very much rooted in the people who live out in the country. And they do talk like that, and they do wear cowboy hats, and they do ride horses, you know what I mean? And but likewise, you think about, I think you see this in a lot of places, there's this idea, I guess it's almost the opposite in New York, where everyone assumes that everyone from New York is New York City, and they have this caricature of
Right.
New York City in their mind. That
Yep.
idea of how Texas is. That said, like, does Texas, swing red? For sure, it does, but it didn't always. Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, was a Democratic president from Texas, and so that's there's this idea of Texas being a certain way, but Texas has these big population centers: Houston, Dallas, huge places, and so when you're there, like, people don't generally have like a Texas accent. You don't see people
Yeah.
wearing so much cowboy outfits. You do a little bit, and
Well, a lot of people have moved out your way, especially since the pandemic. I mean, so a
yeah,
lot
I
of
know.
I mean, I know there's got to be pluses and minuses about that, but I mean, at least like again, like further proves your point that it truly isn't a bunch of Yosemite Sam like people,
Yeah,
you know?
that is definitely the image people have. I would talk to people and they'd be like, "Do you ride a horse to school?" Like when I was in school, I would like have like digital pen pals, you know, with people, and kids from other schools and other places could ask us questions. They're like, "Have you ever been in a twister? Do you ride a horse to school?" It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous things. But that's kind of what people think of. So Austin absolutely has been on the receiving end of a massive influx of people.
Yeah.
That's good for the tea house because more people means more people who will come to the tea house. And we're very like well established by now. We've been in the same spot for a long time and people know who we are. And like the other day, it's been very, very like well attended. We've had really good attendance at the tea house. We've had lots of people drinking
Nice.
tea, buying tea. And our start was like what you described. So I'll take you back to the heady days of 2012, the Obama administration, the end of the world according to the Mayan calendar. So 2012, I moved back from China. And I guess the prequel is that episode 1 is that I worked at a tea house called Jade Leeds Tea House in Austin in 2009. All right. So this was a restaurant / tea house. They had Chinese tea. They had decent Chinese tea. They had decent whole leaf Chinese tea. It came from
Wow.
an acupuncture studio. There was an acupuncture studio, and then they opened a bigger space that had a tea house / restaurant in the front. The restaurant was not great, and Austin has a lot of really good food. It was expensive and
Yeah.
it was slow and it was inconsistent. It's not that the dishes were that terrible. It was just expensive, slow, and inconsistent. And
Inconsistent. Yeah.
inconsistent, yeah. And so you're really good at consistency, by the way, Jeff. I really admire that about you. You're always on there doing live streams, and that's like something that I struggle with personally. But I really appreciate that's like a very valuable trait to have, and I'm working on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I admire it. And I was just talking about that earlier. But the restaurant was inconsistent, and the tea program was good because I ran the tea program. They already had the teas they had. I didn't source tea for them. Alan, my boss, he lived in China. He speaks Chinese. He's an acupuncture. He's a Chinese medicine practitioner,
Oh.
you know? So he sourced a bunch of these teas. And then also there were some that came from like big, American and Canadian, like wholesalers that he was getting like any tea house that you just go to,
Yeah.
would be doing. They're not necessarily doing their own sourcing. They're buying from one of these big importers that has a lot of different teas. They got a catalog and you check boxes. Well, you go to the website and there's like a million different things. And there's,
Yep.
but he didn't have a ton of flavored stuff. He didn't have a ton of scented stuff, and it was all whole leaf Chinese and Taiwanese teas. That's what he had. And it was decent. And they didn't have a Gong Fu Cha program, but I got it going. I went and they didn't have a job for that. And I was like, I will do that for you. I had,
Yeah. Yeah.
I will make this a reality for your tea house that you have Gong Fu Cha. And it went really well. And a lot of people got exposed to Gong Fu Cha during that time, including Eric Dumig, who produces the show Gong Fu Tea Cha on Tea House Ghost. Him and his twin Crow were visiting from Chicago, where they were in school. They lived in Austin, but they were from Austin, but they were going to school in Chicago, and they came by and they came to every one of my classes. They came to every one of my things. They just love tea. They weren't even trying to come do tea. They were coming to get acupuncture and herbs from Alan. So they had to walk through the tea house to get there. And they walked by and I was like, did you come for the tea tasting? And they're like, no, but I'm definitely going to try it. So they stayed and they just fell in love with it. And here, 13 years later, Eric's right now is handling wholesale for us, and he's still producing the show, and we're about to do a bunch more stuff. We just filmed an episode of that show on last Saturday. So that's crazy to think about that, but that's true. And then Crow's back here. They've got a baby Cedar, like our baby is with their baby. So that was like the very, very origins of Austin tea culture, as far as I'm concerned. There was a tea house called Formosa Tea Art House that was run by a Taiwanese woman, and I know her. I've had tea with her. Her name is slipping my mind right now.
The name of the shop rings a bell. Not like I've
It
been
was
there,
a
but it.
long time ago, but it was like, I'm talking like this was like 2007 or something, right?
Oh, geez.
Really long time ago. And there was a cadre of old time tea heads from when that place was open. And they were around. They existed. And then there was Nathan Davis, who was my predecessor at Jade Leach Tea House. He worked there, although he didn't do a Gong Fu Cha program, but he did work there. And he was into tea because he lived in Taiwan. He went and lived and studied in Taiwan, and he got into tea there. So that's kind of what the landscape looked like in 2012. There was people who had gotten into it with Formosa Tea Art House way back in the day. And I'm talking like a handful. I can think of like 4 people that still do tea or were doing tea in the past, 10 years because they got exposed through that way. Then I would say there's and then there's Nathan Davis and people like him. Not that I knew a lot of people, but there were some Taiwanese American people who knew about it and were into it. And then there was leftover people from when I did tea stuff at Jade Leach Tea House. And there's still a number of those people who still exist. I can think of maybe 6 or 7 of those people who are still around and still drink tea.
Yeah, I was talking to Scott the other day, last week, and he brought up that same point.
Which Scott? There's so many tea Scott. Scott Norton, Scott Wilson.
Cute Cha Jin.
Scott Norton.
Yeah.
Have you guys had tea in person yet?
Not in person yet.
But you're both in upstate New York.
He's super far. He's probably like 5 hours from me.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, dude.
That is so long.
I mean, I'm 5.5 hours from the border of the city, like not even to get into the city. Like that's
Are you in Buffalo?
No, I'm smack in between Buffalo and Albany.
Oh.
I'm like cousin... literally the middle point.
Interesting. Are you in like a rural area?
Yeah.
Cool. I've never lived rural, but I always want to. I really want to now that I have a baby. I want to like move out somewhere rural. How do you like it?
Dude, I grew up in the upper middle class suburbs, so I had a really good upbringing, had a new, nice communities and all that, but I always thought I was a city person. And then I spent a lot of time out in New York City and just touring with bands. I went to all different cities.
Okay.
And as soon as I hit my like adult mode, like mid-20s, as the years go on, the further I want to be from a city. Like I don't want to be like way out in the country where I'm not close to a hospital or a grocery store. Like that's
right.
Super important to me. But I like having space. Like let's talk about the pandemic. Like, dude, we have restrictions. I mean, you mask, you have to wear your masks and all that. But like, because we're so far apart, businesses have been operating way more normal than they've been able to operate like in the
New York City,
New York
for
City.
example. Yeah.
Yeah. And like if you were just outside walking around, you didn't have to wear a mask. Like there isn't a big enough concentration of people on a sidewalk to like really require a mask if you're outside. So it's like you have space and it's just nice. I don't like what comes with a city. And that's like lots of politics, lots of businesses that are just mover and shaker businesses. They're not necessarily like businesses that are there because they do something and they love it. It's just, how can I make a buck in this area? I like upstate, and I don't mean to trash cities because there's, everybody likes something a little different.
Yeah, of course.
But I firmly like rural. Like we have again, I'm an hour and a half from Rochester, which isn't a huge city, but it's another city. 2.5 hours from Albany, and that's an actual city. So it's like
it's the capital.
Yeah, so it's like I have cities that, say if I needed to do a day trip and have a day in the city, like there's places I can go.
Wow. But so what do you do most of the time? Like what do your days look like? I guess I really don't have an idea of that. I just know you through Tea Instagram.
Yeah, it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of like securing, connecting people, connecting constantly talking with businesses, trying to not only understand my business and like our industry, but I also really try to understand like what's going on in the retail industry, what's going on in the hospital industry. Like I talk to a lot of people. I ask a lot of questions because, especially these days, where the news is, I don't, we're not going to get on a rant, but it's very unreliable to get an idea of what's going on in the world. So
Uh-huh.
I've found the only way to get real information is by talking to people that are in those places. So there's a lot of that, but it's a lot of Q&A throughout the day. I have the same conversation with a million people a million times a day. It's
Doing
it's
tea stuff.
stun Yeah, it's stunning to me how every now and then obviously you mistaken someone or you forget something. It's completely inevitable, but I'm impressed with how many conversations I have over and over that when I'm talking to a person about having had that conversation, I'm still able to bring myself back to the time when I was talking to that person about it. And
Really.
so it's like, yeah, so it's uh it used to be a real mix of new people that like didn't know anything about tea and then just people that were into tea that just wanted to talk about it. Nowadays it's a little more like people are a little more knowledgeable about tea and it's people that just want to fine tune knowledge they already have. So they just talk to people like me or like you that have our own ways we feel about things, but we've also talked to a million other people that do it a
Sure.
different way. And
Yeah, yeah.
so it's just a lot of
Interesting.
helping. I think it's like almost like in a corny way, it's almost kind of like mentoring a lot.
So you
Like
you spend a lot of time doing that.
a lot. Yeah, a lot of time.
Interesting. That's so
It's it
interesting.
obvious it obviously doesn't like pay the bills. Like it's not a direct thing that I
Sure,
make money
sure.
off of doing it. But obviously the more I people learn information from me and get to know my reputation and my tastes in tea, then if they're in the market for good tea, like I bet they'll at least browse over what I have. And you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like to me
No, that's a,
that
that's a great
making
strategy. That I think that's like totally admirable. I mean, that's what we did. You know, what I mean, that was like you're talking about doing free tea tastings. I did that for years. I did that for years,
yeah.
and about education. Like what doesn't pay the bills? Tea House Ghost, going through tea child. Like that doesn't pay the bills. We don't make any money off of that. But it's about educating. It's about getting the knowledge out there and growing the community. So I totally understand the impulse.
Yeah, I mean, there should be businesses of all types. I'm just definitely not the type of person that's just max profit and move and shake. Like that's for certain people and what the product those people offer is fine for some people. They're happy with that, but I'm glad that I can to some degree sit back and just sort of accept the customers that are looking for what I have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But every now and then, like you have to do like that's what all the lives are about and stuff. It's just about outreach and being there, and people have so many questions about tea. That's why more people aren't into tea. It's
Yeah.
just because they have questions and they don't know who to ask. And a lot of people, like even though they might know someone who's like really knowledgeable on tea, some people that are really knowledgeable on tea like are very biased towards certain information, and certain people might feel uncomfortable asking someone like that certain questions when trying to learn about tea. So it's
I
like
need an
it's not
example of
only
that.
oh god. um Let me think.
Bias towards certain types of information.
So some people come from very strict teachings in tea,
Oh, right, right, right,
and
right.
that's not wrong, that's not right. But if you're let's say you're a person who's you know you're you're not necessarily trying to a question, the same question can be asked to people from different teachings, and they'll each have a slightly different answer.
I think I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. So like, this is something I say a lot is there's no T Pope. There's no T Pope. There's no right way. There's no one right way.
Right.
You know, there's no one right way. There's no orthodoxy, although some people act as though there is. And I think that
Well,
there's,
there's
go on.
even some, I really think there's some let's say like take the teachings of like grass people tree.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like some people might be able to look at that and go, oh, well, they say it's got to be this way. I hear from this other person that way. That person, as in grass people tree, in this like topic we're talking about, I don't think they're wrong for believing what they believe and instructing what they instruct. I think that she comes from like a very specific practice,
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
and I think it's super important to like to like be respective towards that. Like as much as it's important that you should sit and allow her to fully speak, as much as you should take that and decide for yourself which way you want to learn.
Sure. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So like Ray from Grass People Tree, she has a teacher. Her teacher is Master Lin Guion, and he is teaching her about tea and making tea and various traditions about tea. And
Guangzhou way.
yeah, yeah. So that's the philosophy behind the way that he makes tea is living tea, you know, seed propagated tea. You're harvesting the whole plant. You're not separating the parts of the plant from each other. It's like a body. And you're right. There are these philosophies around tea. That said, you know, Grass People Tree is not dogmatic about their approach to that. They don't say
No,
that other tea
no.
is not good. They're just saying that this is what we call living tea and we like this. But there are people who are dogmatic, is the thing. That's what I'm
Or
getting
like
at.
and also it's hard, like say you don't know Ray, right? And let's say you're getting into tea and you log in and you're like, wait, I read this intro book on tea, and the stuff that she's saying that it's different, but I'm sitting here looking at this book and it's not saying what she's saying. All of a sudden, this new person, this fragile tea brain is sitting there stuck with this. You know what I mean? Like I always try to be so, I mean, for my own how I do things, I try to stay as open as possible. I try to take every successful way of brewing I know, and when somebody asks me, "Hey, how should I brew a tea?" I really try to be like, "Hey, how do you like your tea? Let's figure out a way that works for you." And like, so somebody who doesn't know her or know the business, like they being new could have just a misconception and see someone like that and go, "Ooh, I'm in because this information doesn't line up with what I read in this little book. I'm embarrassed asking a question."
Sure.
It's not
Yeah.
so. Sorry. I think I'm not saying that this person would assume that she's wrong.
Right. 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 Right.
They're more so just looking at it, just confused, like, "Uh-oh, what do I do here?" And so instead of digging further or taking the chance of asking the person, they don't.
Sure, you're right, because it's very baffling. The world of tea is baffling, in the sense that people come to it with a legitimate and sincere desire to do it right, assuming that there's one right way to do it. And there's some reasons for this. One reason is that Japanese tea ceremony is that way. You have
Very.
to do it in a particular way. If you go hang out with Scott Norton, cute Chajin, then you'll get to have tea with him. He's very, very good at serving the chanoyu, the traditional Japanese tea ceremony. But that is like that, and you do have to sit a certain way, and you do have to bow a certain way, and you do have to hold the bowl a certain way. And if you don't do
Mm-hmm.
those things, it is wrong. It is inappropriate. And so I think
Yep.
that the West has known about Japanese tea ceremony for a long time. There was a extremely racist caricature of it by Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's, for example. But
Really?
oh yeah, go watch Breakfast at Tiffany's and watch Mickey Rooney in yellowface. It is cringe. It is cringe guardium leviosa. You know what I mean? It's terrible.
Oh
Dude, go
no.
watch it. And other than that, it's not a bad movie, but it does have this extremely,
Ooh,
and like,
I
I'm
didn't hear
not
about
mad at
that.
Mickey Rooney per
Right.
se. It's the way the world was, and it's wrong that the world was that way. And I'm not going to fault him. He's an actor, but it's extremely, extremely cringy and terrible. And
Oh.
they've got his eyes pulled back. It's terrible. He's wearing a kimono. Yeah. Anyways, but my point is, Mickey Rooney aside, my point is that we as a nation, the United States has a close relationship with Japan. We do not with China. We have this kind of very tense relationship of really kind of enmity with China.
Hmm.
But whereas Japan, although we fought them in World War II, we helped rebuild their nation. We gave them all these patents and technologies and helped build them
Yep.
up into this economic superpower in Asia and our trading partners. And we gave them these very favorable trading terms. And so Japanese culture has a lot more closeness. Hold on. Japanese culture, there's a lot more familiarity and closeness to Japanese culture than there is to Chinese culture in the West. And so we know about Japanese tea ceremony. We have for generations. And it is formal. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Chinese tea culture is not, by and large, formal. Obviously, formal expressions of it exist. The imperial
Hmm.
tradition of tea service was formal because they made everything
Right.
formal. Like what Yao Yao teaches, Chai Yi is formal. But the
Hmm.
majority, the body of tea practice going on in China and Taiwan is informal. What has
Yeah.
come down to us through the Cultural Revolution in the 20th century is informal. The forms that have persisted and have never been broken, these unbroken traditions, are grandma and grandpa in southern-ass China, not speaking Mandarin, speaking another language, Chaozhouhua, Minnanhua, Guangdonghua, aka Cantonese, like making tea in their little teapot, super bitter in 3 little cups. You know what I mean? Or
Yep.
like in Hong Kong style, in a dim sum place, sitting eating dim sum with your own little teapot. And there's a locker at the restaurant where the patrons keep their teapots. That's what has come down to us from the ancient China till now in its modern form. And then that diversified and grew and blossomed in the late 20th century into what you and I do now.
Yeah.
But as far as an unbroken tradition going back to the Ming Dynasty, presumably, because that's the only place it could have come from. And we know that we were doing stuff. You've got little teapots and paintings. You've got gaiwans and paintings. You've got paintings of emperors going back into the Ming, where you've got teapots and you've got gaiwans, as long as they've been doing steep tea. So it's interesting because when you do encounter situations where you've got someone, and you see this a lot in the West, where someone's being very dogmatic about tea and they're saying, this is the way, this is the only way. If you don't serve it
Yeah.
this way, then you're doing it wrong. Look, a great example. Here's an analogy. What's the right way to spell pu'er? Puer, Puerh, Pu
What about
apostrophe er, Pu hyphen
oolong
er.
oolong?
Yep, wulong
And
or
and
oolong.
I technically do that one wrong. I am very much, dude. That is something I'm trying. I really do. For anybody who's ever like, oh, look at him, he's not spelling Wulong correctly. I, at least hear this and know that it is things I notice, dude. It's 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 something that I've over time I've battled. Like I said, like, oh, it's all right whether it's OO or W, but technically the WU really is, from what I've researched. I mean, it's really the correct way to write it, and I feel like if you're trying to say it right, seeing it spelled that way is better.
Sure, sure. Yeah, if
Um,
you're trying to say it right, I think here's
but
my
it's hard
personal take on
because
it.
so like I just want to get my point. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but then like if I want to make that shift, which I do, that's so hard because of like what we've been talking about. Because then people go, oh wait, so then have I been writing it wrong? And then because people are trying to get things right, they're so it's oh dude, it's as an educator sometimes it's so hard to um always feel like I'm giving the person the best advice that I can give.
Sure.
that's the best researched out of all the ways for that person?
So Jeff, let me put it this way. There's the right way. There is no right or wrong way. Well, there's wrong ways. There is no right way to spell a Chinese word using the English alphabet. There's no right way to do that. There are different ways. For example, you know, uh, oolong or wulong. The word is wulong cha. If you spell it with an oo or a wu, you're right. Wulong, wu, makes you want to say wulong. And if your goal is for people to call it wulong cha instead of oolong cha, I think that's totally a reasonable goal because, yeah. But that said, they don't call, it's not called puer, it's called puar. But I'm not going to spend my time correcting people on that because that introduces this kind of orthodox thinking that we're talking about, which, and this is actually ties back into your question to me about tea in Texas. Orthodoxy is not important to tea. It is part of tea culture. It is an expression of tea culture. It is legitimate when it exists, but it is not a governing force. So spelling, let me give you an example of this in English, how to spell puar. You can spell it with an H. You can spell it with an apostrophe. You can spell it with a hyphen. It's pronounced the same way no matter how you spell it. The right way to write it is like this, you know, like in Chinese, you know.
The character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's the right way to write it. How you spell it, the only thing that matters about how you spell it, there's two things that I think matter about how you spell it. One, is it recognizable, not just for humans, but for AI? Because I write OOLONG too. You know why? Because SEO. And because that's what's understood. And I could put wulong, but I'd have to explain to everybody what I was talking about. Meanwhile, if you actually want to learn about tea culture, you will confront that. We teach classes. Sinya teaches a class that is Chinese Mandarin for tea lovers. We call it Speaking Tea. And she teaches people how to say the first class, Hong Cha, Lu Cha, Bai Cha, Wulong Cha. Learn how to say them. If you really want to say them for real. If you really want to say them, learn to say puar instead of puer, you know? And again, I'm not going to go around correcting people. Personally, people come in here and they say puer all day long. And if someone asks me, I'll tell them. But when I go to, when this fragile tea mind, as you put it, this neophyte is coming in and they are worried about, they're tiptoeing around because they're worried about offending somebody because they get something wrong. In that state of mind and in that social environment, it is not beneficial for me to harp on them for things that they shouldn't necessarily already know. And being corrected for Americans feels like a rebuke. And so I do my best to not come across, and I try we teach our staff and everyone to do this as well. Be gentle with people. People don't know about this stuff. It's not part of their culture. They want to be respectful. They're coming in, they want to be respectful. And if they get snapped at too much, then they're not going to come back and they're not going to explore their love of tea. And what we really want is for people to love tea and enjoy tea. And my answer to your question is, how do you grow tea culture in Texas? Don't be a snob. Don't be pretentious about it, because Texans do not like that. It is very much part of the culture to be down to earth and authentic. That is the major part of what I would say defines pan-Texan culture across the board, the countryside and the cities. Right. It gets perceived, they call us the friendly state. And be that as it may, that Texans, there's a lot of people in Texas who are extremely conservative. There are a lot of people who are racist, homophobic. That's real. That exists. However, those people are polite and friendly. And if you get into a conversation with them, you will be able to connect with them authentically. And my guess is that they're only racist and homophobic because they don't know any gay, or they don't know any queer or people of color. They're out there in the boonies, with this ideology. But as a way of being, Texans are very friendly, and it's not this kind of effusive, demonstrative, performative friendliness like you would get in some places, where there's no substance to it. It's this very authentic, hey, howdy, like people really say that, and they really are very warm and welcoming. And I think
I would assume they're probably friendlier than your average New Yorker.
I would say
No
absolutely. Having
offense, New
spent
Yorkers, but sorry, we're not a very we. If you know that about, if you've lived in New York, you should know we are not the number one thing we are is not is we're not friendly.
No, New Yorkers are not friendly, but they are kind. They are kind
Mm,
by and large. They are good people, and they will do the right thing. And they will come to your. I've been helped by people in New York a lot when I'm in distress. If I'm lost or I need something, they will take the time out of their day to help me. It's when I'm like walking along and I'm not walking fast enough. That's when they're not very friendly. You know what I mean? Like I'm in their way. You know what I mean? I'm from Texas. I do things slow. So I go up to New York, but I love New York, and New Yorkers are not mean people. They are not friendly, and I did perceive them as rude the first time I went there, coming from Texas,
yep.
having never been to the East Coast before. My first time there, I remember I was like trying to burn a piece of spinach with a magnifying glass for some stupid reason. I was in college. I was acting like a child, but I was doing this, and I was there with my girlfriend who was from Massachusetts. She was from Lexington. And she was familiar with the East Coast, and I was trying to burn this leaf, and I was kind of on this lady's sidewalk stoop area, and she comes to a window. She goes, "You're going to start a fire?" And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, I'm just burning this thing." And she's like, "Well, you want to do it somewhere else?" And she wasn't mean. She was just very straightforward. Like, "Hey, stranger, don't burn stuff on my porch." Totally reasonable. She didn't say please, and she wasn't friendly about it. She just wanted me to
Yep.
do it. But she wasn't mean either, and it wasn't unreasonable. But in Texas, it would have been, "Well, hi there. How you doing? What are you doing there? Can I help you with something?" And it'd be,
Yep.
"Oh, that's neat. What are you doing that for? Is this for a science experiment?"
People
But
always talk about
anyways,
Texan. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, no. Go ahead. I was done.
People always talk about Texans like it's if you if you step on their lawn, they're gonna come at you with a shotgun. Like
And
it's
if you're a black man in the wrong neighborhood, they will. You know what I mean? And that's where that racism comes in. That's the reality of the
there's probably
situation. Is
areas
that
in New York where that's true too.
sure, sure, exactly. But I by and large, Texas, and we do have a lot of guns. Texans have a lot of guns, and they love their guns. And
Yeah.
there's definitely violence in Texas, but the majority experience of most Texans, unless they're in a general sense, and to put it another way, if you're a black man and you're invited to go to brunch with a friend of theirs that they know and they bring you, then I'm sure they'll have a lovely time with you. You know what I mean? Or like, or like some person that they're already friends with introduces you and they give you a fair chance. I'm sure you'll have a great experience. But if you're a stranger and you're on their lawn and you're out in the country, you might get shot. But I probably wouldn't, and you probably would. You know what I mean? That's just the reality of the situation. So it's complex. It's very complex. But Texans and it won't be like that in Austin. You know what I mean? Austin is extremely progressive, socially progressive, and politically progressive city. And
Did you
and
have a
you know
lot
it's
of how was the state of that during the I guess it's still going on, but the sort of Asian hate wave that started uh in the past, I don't know, when was it? It was towards the
It
beginning
was
of
like last
Corona
summer or something like that. Yeah, it was
when
like in
everyone
the
got
summer of 2020.
super Asian
Yeah, yeah,
phobic.
yeah. And there was that. There
How
was
bad
the
was it?
Nashville shootings was like really the kind of the climax of that, or like this big punctuation mark in that was when that man went and shot a bunch of Asian women in Nashville, and then the sheriff brought him in and said, he just had a really bad day. And that's like, I remember, dude. And it's like,
Oh,
wow, fuck you. Like, fuck you. These women are dead. Their
oh.
families have lost their family member. And you're saying this guy had a bad day? Like, they had a bad day. That's who had a bad day, is the people whose daughter died, etc. Anyways, yes. How was it? I never experienced any kind of anti-Asian racism or sentiment
Beautiful.
in Austin, Texas. I am not saying that it doesn't
Beautiful.
happen. I'm not
Right,
saying it
right.
doesn't happen. I did not observe any of that. And there were places where people's windows were broken. Shunan's window was broken. Tea Drunk was broken into during that time. And Shunan got
Dude,
punched in the face. Did you know that? She got a
no
black eye.
shit.
She got punched in the face. She got a black eye. Talk about
Dude,
that. But yeah.
there was even in my little city here, dude, So we have a our main university is the main pride of this city. It's what they put all the income into, um, and what all the businesses have to hail towards, or they have to like bow to whatever the university wants. Uh, we're a large, we have a large Asian population
Uh-huh.
in the city, and especially the school. A lot of students from Asia, dude, and also a lot of privileged D bags, dude.
Right, right.
There was spray painted stuff. There
Are you
was
serious?
dude, there was a, I mean, more than any small city should have. And it was just, it wasn't like there, I don't think there was any like blatant violence, but dude, it was if you were Asian and you were walking home, multiple cars would shout shit at you.
Are you serious?
Dude,
Wow,
there
that is
is
jarring.
there I was I mean, I never thought it was that bad. I had no idea. And it was, yeah, it was very unfortunate. I mean, there wasn't a ton of it, but again, for a small city,
Right,
much
right,
more
right.
than there should have been.
If
And
there's stuff
unfortunately,
getting, yeah,
because there's Asians here.
right, yeah, yeah. So people already feel this tension, and then the opportunity is there to lash out. I mean, I think that's like you said, you'd never expect it because society at this point has generally accepted that racism is a bad thing, and so
Right,
people keep
right.
their racist tendencies hidden, you know, and people keep those ideologies, and not even they don't have to belong to an ideology. They just have to have they just have to have unexamined views. They have to have
Yeah,
unexamined beliefs that they haven't taken the time, because we're all racist. We're all racist. Society raises us all to be racist, and we have all we can do is talk about it, confront it, and decolonize
yeah,
ourselves, and do the work. But if you
yeah,
don't do that, if you don't take the time to do that, you absolutely, when push comes to shove, and you feel like you're mad about the pandemic and you're suffering and you want to blame somebody, that's when you roll down your window and you're like, hey, go back to China, etc. Whatever it is that people said. And who knows about what violence didn't get reported, that's there.
the only actual thing I witnessed with my own two eyes is one of the past years I was in Toronto for the Tea Fest. It was the last one then. It was the one right before, it was in February, right before everything shut down.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And we were outside of a tea cafe grabbing a drink, and a homeless guy just goes up to this young Asian man and just starts cursing him out and getting in his face. And you could tell the young Asian gentleman wasn't doing anything, and he was just trying to get away from the guy. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like even yelling back or saying anything. He was just trying to get on his way while the guy's like yelling stuff at him. Uh, and then the hobo starts actually trying to like throw fists at him, and
Wow. In Toronto.
everybody's standing there frozen, like, okay, like analyzing the situation and going, okay, who needs to do what, when, is this real, what's going on? And then once people started, like, we yelled something, once people started, there was a guy who was standing in between them who had a hockey stick, funny enough, in
Wow.
Canada. And
So
he
classic.
so but so uh, but he was scared by the situation too. So he was just sort of standing in between them with the stick, just like not like fighting anyone off, but just sort of like keeping his stance and just sort of being like, "Oh my God, is this happening?" But the guy, and then as the hobo was, uh, cursing away after everyone yelled at this guy to leave him alone, that's when he starts yelling the racial slurs and stuff, and it's like, that's like you just said when we were talking about it. It was just like, I know that racism isn't gone. I'm aware it's very alive still, but dude, there's just certain things that you really felt that there was a genuine, somewhat global knowledge of, this is something that maybe if I say is kind of distasteful. But to
Sure.
see that there really is still, there's still a lot of people with that, not even a single regard of that, is like,
let me give you,
Oof.
so this is actually a really, really great juncture. And I'm really grateful that we're for you giving that example, because it's surprising to you because you didn't grow up Asian. It's not surprising to me
Yep.
because I grew up Asian. And you know who doesn't censor themselves? Little kids. They say what everybody's thinking. And I'll tell you what, it was like that example when push comes to shove, right? When push comes to shove, I'm upset because the pandemic's hurting me. I'm upset because I'm a homeless person, probably with mental illness, and I'm probably
Mm-hmm.
addicted to drugs, and my life is terrible. And I see
Very
this
clearly,
person,
yes.
right? And so who am I going to take it out on? I can't take it out on the most privileged and powerful people in society. I take it out on the people who are closer to me in privilege, because I can abuse them and get away with it, right? I can
Yeah.
abuse them and get away with it. If the tables were turned and you had a different population of people doing that to, for example, white women, for example, if you had people of color driving by and multiple of them shouting things at, white women, or saying people are spray painting, kill whitey, you would have gotten a much more punctuated response, probably, I'm sure, from the police. But that doesn't ever happen. You never see that stuff because the people know that they don't have the ability. They will get whacked down. But you can fuck with someone who's adjacent to you, or just
Yeah,
above you, or just below you.
I never thought about it like that, and that's sad that you're probably correct that people. I mean, look at Asian. I mean, there are definitely Asians that fight back. Like there are definitely Asians that'll fight back. But let's just talk about the regular Asian person walking down the street. They're trying to just do their own thing. They're trying to keep to themselves, do their work, come home, spend time with the family, live their
Yeah,
own lives. They're not trying to offend anyone
right.
at
Yeah, that's
all.
true.
So it's they're so like you said, I never thought about it like that. It's almost more pathetic because it's easy picking. It's not that you should aim to like offend like anyone, but it's sad that
Yeah.
people see that like they're not going to fight back, so I can yell some shit at them.
It's not
Like,
even about fighting back. It's about the
ugh,
degree of punishment you will receive from society for committing an offense against someone who has lots of privilege.
yeah,
That's what I mean. You know what I mean? It's like if you're going to go and it's like these serial killers who kill prostitutes. Why do they kill prostitutes? Because the police don't give a fuck about the prostitutes. Pardon my language, but I really don't think
no,
that in general,
that's
in,
correct.
in, in a
That's correct.
general sense, I'm sure individual cops care, but the media doesn't care. And except for sensationalism of the
Well,
event of murder, they don't care about the victim. And the
just with
same.
that example, yeah. Go ahead.
And so you've got a situation, and so like I said, it's invisible to you. Anti-Asian
Yep.
racism is invisible to you because you're not an Asian person, you didn't grow up in an environment. Because when people do these things, normally they do it where no one else can see it. They will not usually do these things way out in public. Spray painting a wall is anonymous. You wouldn't usually have people
Yep.
driving by shouting anti-Asian racist stuff until they think that they can get away with it because the sentiment is strong enough, that there's enough consensus among their peers that actually fuck these guys and they can get away with it and it's okay. And so, and the
Yeah.
same is true. I like to think of that's what privilege is not having to think about discrimination. And I'll give an example. You and me are men. I identify as a man. I don't know for a fact that you do, but I assume you do. I'm making an assumption. I'm assuming your
I
gender.
do.
Is that accurate? Okay. Yeah, me too. As men, have you ever been catcalled by a man? Have you ever been catcalled by a man? Like rolling down their window, shouting at you from the car.
It was an isolated incident, but
Sure,
but
sure.
no, you're correct. You're correct though. Yeah,
Right.
in general, no, obviously not.
Question two. Have you ever been with a woman and had the woman you were with be catcalled as you were walking with her?
Oh, for sure,
Really? Okay.
for sure. Not like every day, but I have definitely been with females as they've been told very lewd things.
Really? Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Well, that's that second one, is I
we'll
haven't
skip that one.
experienced that as much. I've found that women that I feel like in where I am at least, the presence of a male companion means that they're not as likely to do that. And so And I've asked that question to other people, and I think it's a cultural thing. Depends on where you are, how much catcalling is felt acceptable. But my point is that you could go through life as a man and think that catcalling is very, very rare or doesn't exist at all, because it doesn't happen to you, and it generally doesn't happen in your presence.
Well,
Racist
I
stuff
should
won't
also
usually
add,
happen.
I'm not a tough looking guy. So for this example, your point is still 100%. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a threatening looking person. I never have been. So I don't think
I
I would be
mean,
a large deterrent. But say that you were a more, male, you're right. That probably wouldn't say anything.
because you don't want to get fucked with. You don't want their boyfriend like getting pissed off and fucking
Yep.
whatever. And I'm not. I'm like 5'7". I'm not an imposing figure, but that's my experience. Is I haven't seen women be catcalled in my presence. One time I did have a guy just holler, but he didn't see me. And then when he saw me, it was dark. I was with my then girlfriend and then also my cousin, who's a woman, and they were platinum blonde, dressed in white. It was very, very visible from across the parking lot. And this guy just holler and hey, 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 like shouting across the parking lot, hey, you. Very scary and threatening if you're a woman by yourself, or even a man by yourself alone at night, to have someone shouting at you from across, extremely threatening. And then he got closer, and I walked out in front of them. I was like, okay, and he couldn't see me until I got closer. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were with them. And he apologized to me, not to them. And I told him, like, you should apologize to them. And he was talking about all this different stuff. And I was like, look, would you want some guy shouting at you from across the parking lot that you don't know? And he's like, no, but like, and I was like, dude, he's like, I don't know. It was a good conversation. I mean, it wasn't like a confrontation. It was a conversation. Because but the thing is, when he saw me, he stopped, and then he was respectful. But he wouldn't have been
Yeah.
that way if he had met up with those women, my girlfriend and my cousin, and they were alone. He wouldn't have been apologizing, and he wouldn't have suddenly become respectful. He would have probably persisted. And he made it clear that he wasn't like really going to take no for an answer. If he took no, he would only take no for an answer as like, well, I'm being discriminated against, was kind of his attitude, for no. And so we had a conversation, and I invited him to TS. He never ended up coming, but
Hey, the invitation was there.
yeah, the invitation was there. Hopefully he does one day. But yeah, I think that's what comes down to is I think it's really good that you're. It's bad that these things are happening, but it's good that it reveals to the general population that this is still an issue, and that many people do go through life with these unexamined biases, and that when they're put in a corner, they will lash out at the people who they can lash out at because they won't get in trouble. It's like, this is how privilege and abuse works. Boss yells at dad. Dad yells at mom. Mom yells at me. I yell at my little brother. My little brother grows up to be a fucking psychopath, and he like kills 13 women, he's got like some kind of serial killer name or something. That's how it goes. Abuse comes from above, and it goes down, and you cannot push back against it. If you have more privilege than me, you have the higher ground. You have the upper hand. I cannot get revenge on you. I can only reproduce that trauma down the scale, And
That's why
so
I'm always really upfront with how privileged, like, because I am obviously, yes, I am factually privileged, but in the terms of how privileged white people can be, I'm not the top of that crop.
sure.
But I'm also still constantly learning, as I've done today with you, that there are just more things of just learning new layers and new points of view, because I do care about it, and I do, in the end of the day, want to be a more respectful person. So, sometimes it is uncomfortable because you have to admit
It is,
that
yeah.
you have been guilty of this or that. But I feel like as long as you're a person who, like, you are genuinely sorry and you are taking steps to right your behavior, then
Absolutely.
if nothing else, I mean, how could you fully fault somebody that's really trying?
Absolutely.
Like, as
Absolutely.
long as there's an effort.
As
So
well
we
as long as there's acknowledgement and effort.
Right. So
Acknowledgement.
we have unraveled the time. I pushed us past a little bit because we were rolling, so I was like,
That was
I
good. That was such a
can't
good
just
conversation, Jeff. Thank you. That was awesome.
no problem. Obviously, your name is Sohan. If for people that don't already know you, your house is West China Tea. Uh, I'll add all of your links and your social media stuff. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what is your preferred method?
Oh, go to our website, westchinatea.com, and there's all the ways to contact us on that website. You can also go to our Instagram at West China Tea. I'm the one who reads the Instagram messages. I don't necessarily get to them all in a timely manner. Sometimes they get buried. I think I have undiagnosed ADHD. But anyways, there's got a good shot though of getting to me through Instagram messages. And then also, yeah, just visit our website. There's lots of different ways to contact us and learn about what we do through there.
Beautiful, and also obviously shop for your teas.
Sure. Yeah. Buy tea wear, tea pets, etc. And we teach
All
classes
right.
and all that. Yeah.
All right, Sohan. Well, I'll do a final last cheers to you, and obviously continued health and happiness to you and your family. And here's to another hopeful good year of West China Tea.
Likewise. And Unity. Cheers.
Thank you.